we live now? This is totally different from what it was before. There we go. Okay, perfect. Wait, wait for a couple people to hop on here while I do that. Let's see if I can man the comments. I can't even comment. What kind of garbage? Oh, there it is. Boom. Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. So we're all set up now. The live stream's a little bit different. Long time no talk. I'm Ryan from the Sports Carnage podcast, and today we're going to be talking to you guys about really the only thing of note to happen in Detroit sports recently, I guess besides the Tigers draft. But the Pistons 2 days ago, I think they made it official that they're hiring Troy Weaver from the Oklahoma City Thunder as their general manager, and it's something that I could not be more excited about. He was definitely the best candidate on the market, and there are a lot of local, really two local guys that people thought Chauncey Billups or Tayshaun Prince should possibly get a crack at being the general manager. But at the end of the day, they went with the guy with the most experience, who has really a proven track record, which somebody like Chauncey doesn't have, and Tayshaun has a little bit more of that, but he's still sort of new at it. And the things that I really like about Troy Weaver, or the hire in general, is he spent most of his front office time in scouting. So he knows how to identify top talent, and he's been somebody that teams have wanted to get at least in an interview room the last couple of years, and he's turned them down. The Thunder have kind of stashed him away for themselves because he was so he's so valuable to what they are. And I was trying to get some, I guess you could say, stories or like triumphs that Weaver got in terms of like guys he really liked for the draft, and the only one that pops up is Russell Westbrook. He was huge in pushing for the Thunder to take Russell Westbrook at, I think, pick 3 or 4 during his draft, when a lot of mock drafts and things like that had him kind of just fringe on the top 10. And he really planted his flag in like the Russell Westbrook needs. The Russell Westbrook is our guy. He's the guy that you should end up taking, and obviously it worked out tremendously for Oklahoma City. So he's able to identify that, and especially in this draft, I think it's pretty obvious that the Pistons are looking towards point guard. And they're probably going to have a top 5 pick. They haven't done the lottery yet. But they're, again, most likely have a top 5 pick. So you give somebody like that, who obviously has an eye for a good point guard, a lot of cap space, and then the draft position too. So it's really exciting for the future of the Pistons. It might take him a little while to really to get things going. The benefits, and I guess why someone would take this job, if the Pistons have a ton of cap space. They have like $30 million in cap space this upcoming free agency, and we just talked about they're probably going to have a top 5 pick, which is pretty clear and pretty enticing to general managers. The downside of it is it's not a very good free agency class this year. Brandon Ingram is a restricted free agent. My guess is the Pistons will offer him the max, and then New Orleans is going to match it, so he's gonna stay there. And then you have guys like Fred VanVleet. I think LaMarcus Aldridge's contract is up, but he's older now, so he isn't somebody that the Pistons would probably really be eyeing anyway in terms of a rebuild, because he is just too old for them, even if he's the type of player that it makes sense that they want. And then they still have the choice to make on if they want to re-sign Christian Wood or not. And it really just kind of depends on how much money they want to give him, and they want to tie up in him. And during the last part of the season, he was before it got stopped by everything. He was really coming on, but he does have some deficiencies in his game, and he's not a super old guy, but it's not like he's 21 years old or anything like that either. So they do have some tough decisions to make, and I think how Weaver navigates this offseason and definitely this draft is going to of course, show you kind of how he wants to build it for the future and the blueprint that the Pistons are just looking to set up. Some of the other guys that the Thunder have drafted during Weaver's time there. And remember, they've been a good team and a good organization, so they haven't been picking, top five a whole lot. Uh, they drafted Reggie Jackson later in the first round, guys like Steven Adams later in the first round, Darius Bazley, who's on their team now, and then they've had some misses as well. If you can get Steven Adams, and we saw a lot of Reggie Jackson, but for where they picked him, Reggie Jackson he outperformed his draft value, which is really kind of all you can ask for. And when he was with Oklahoma City, he was to trying to be nice. He was a bit of a cancer there. He thought he should have started in front of Russell Westbrook, and he really just wanted his time to shine. And he obviously got that when he came to Detroit. But even before then, when they were bringing him off the bench, he was real instrumental in helping them beat the Memphis Grizzlies in a playoff series. And it was kind of his coming out party, and really where he just shined. So if you have a guy who's good at identifying talent like that, you obviously want that on your team. And then they drafted, some busts as well. Guys like I think it's Josh Huestis. They drafted Perry Jones III, who was really highly regarded coming out of high school. Fell a bit in the draft, and then when he was picked, it was pretty obvious why he fell, just because he wasn't very good. But you're going to have way more of those in the second. When you're drafting in like the later part of the first round, you're typically not getting guys who are going to start for you. So, when you can even find guys like Adams and find guys like Reggie Jackson, it's a pretty impressive scouting job. And that's how the Pistons are going to build. They're going to be building, of course, through the draft and through trades, because it's not, people don't really want to come here in free agency, sadly enough. And, unless you end up overpaying some of the guys, but that's what happens sometimes. And it's just kind of the nature of doing business in a town like Detroit. Will says, finally, after 32 years, having someone that knows how to build by drafting NBA star potential commodities. He could, like I said, he obviously wasn't running the draft for Oklahoma City. He was just kind of 1A over there in OKC, and you've seen what I think they want to do, and it matches up a little bit with kind of what Tom Gores was trying to do and what he was trying to get the last front office to do, and they just failed at it, was rebuild while still being a competitive team. I mean, you even look at it this year, Oklahoma City, I think they're sixth in the West right now, fifth or sixth. And they shipped off Russell Westbrook, they shipped off Paul George, and they got a lot of draft picks in return. They did get Chris Paul, but the reason that they got Chris Paul is because Chris Paul's contract is out of control. So they're able to get assets and then still put together a team, still around Steven Adams, again, who was there, who they drafted. Guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, of course, Chris Paul. And I think that's kind of the model that that Weaver will want to take with the Pistons is, be as competitive as you can, and still having enough assets, of course, to build for the future, where then, if you have enough assets, you can flip them for a superstar, or you can, just hoard all your draft picks and take basically as many shots as possible in drafting a superstar to your team, and then developing them and hoping they stay long enough to give you a title. Because I think if you draft a superstar, you have them for probably like 7 or 8 years guaranteed, as long as they don't try and demand a trade. But just with the way like the contracts and everything works out, and restrictions for free agency and stuff. Spencer says, here's the real question. You think this hire will be able to help us hold on to Christian Wood? I think the money will be able to help us to hold on to Christian Wood. I don't think it matters who's the general manager. It's just a matter of the Pistons finding a number that Christian Wood likes. You could be the general manager, and as long as you give him the number he wants, I think he's going to stay. Now it's really just at what point does that number become too high, because it's certainly something that can happen with Christian Wood. And With the Pistons, like I said, I think they'll want to be competitive. I don't think, they're going to go the way of the Sixers did a couple years ago, where they're just unloading every single one of their good players and trying to tank for, top five draft pick, top five draft pick, top five draft pick. Uh, I I don't expect the Pistons to do that, especially when you have guys like Blake Griffin here. Although we did just put out a piece on Detroit Sports Nation on the ways that the Pistons could unload Blake Griffin's contract. So go look at that if you haven't yet. There are some options there, but when you have guys like Blake, you still have guys like Luke Kennard. Provided everyone stays healthy, there's you're probably not going to be bad enough to catch, like how bad the Warriors were this year. Obviously, they weren't healthy, but I don't think the Pistons are ever going to be that bad to guarantee themselves like a top, one pick or top two pick or something like that, or even really get close into position. This year would have been the best time to do it. When you traded Andre, you bought out Reggie and you let him walk, and Blake was done for a lot of the year, and Luke Kennard was hurt. I know Derrick Rose was hurt, so you had kind of all of these things break right for you if you're somebody who wanted to tank. And then unfortunately the season stopped, and the Pistons didn't get to finish out losing the rest of their games. Right? So Steph Curry had just come back for the Warriors, and him alone is probably enough to get the Warriors more wins than the Pistons would have had on the season. But now that they stopped and they just sent all the bad teams home, I think the Pistons have the fifth best odds at the number one pick, or fifth worst odds, one of those two. But it's not as low as I think some of us would have liked and some of us would have expected to happen. But with that being said, you can get any lottery luck, and the Pistons are kind of overdue because they have never had the first pick, which is sad. But hopefully that comes to fruition this year. But yeah, I think with Christian Wood, with guys like Fred VanVleet, the Pistons have some interesting options in free agency, but you also don't want to overspend because that's going to be that'd be the quickest thing really that could kill a general manager is paying Christian Wood like $20 million a year, or trying to max out Fred VanVleet or something, where you're probably not going to be bad enough for the lottery, given your guys stay relatively healthy, but you're also not going to be good enough to even be like a top 4 seed in the East. So it's kind of a delicate balance that I think the Pistons have to walk. I am excited about this, and I've seen this a lot since the Pistons got Troy Weaver, or since it became official, announced, or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of like, oh, well, the Pistons front office is just going to meddle, so it doesn't matter who they have. Guys like Tom Gores, Ed Stefanski, like Arn. I really don't think that's the case. I think Tom Gores was probably, a meddling owner at first, and things needed to go through him. But I think, trading Andre Drummond for a second-round draft pick kind of signaled that he understands maybe he's not as good as the basketball part as he thought he was, and now he's going to let his basketball people just kind of run the show. And as far as Stefanski, I don't think Stefanski did a bad job when he was kind of the de facto general manager. But I think if he wanted to be the general manager, or things were still going to run through him, I think they would have just given him the title, or he would have said, "Hey, I'll just keep doing this." Right? If you have a guy like Ed Stefanski, and for whatever reason you think he's like some power control freak, I don't see why he would let somebody else come in and be a general manager, or even kind of have the title. I think he just wanted for himself, if it was the kind of guy that he was. And I don't know how much Arn Tellem is really influencing things. I think it definitely helped with the Derrick Rose signing, which wasn't a bad signing to begin with. And I think, we talked about Detroit not being really a free agent destination. Arn Tellem is one of the things that a player's not going to come to Detroit. I want to say attract free agents, but nobody's going to come to Detroit because Arn Tellem is here. But I think if he's a guy that you have in your meeting, he's somebody that the NBA players typically will, he'll be a positive for them. because he has managed guys like Derrick Rose. You know, he was Kobe Bryant's manager, I think, at the start of his career. I know he was definitely his manager. I just don't know at what portion of his career, but I think it was the start of Kobe's career. And I think he's just kind of well thought of in NBA circles. So if you have him in a meeting, it's better than basically not having him in a meeting. Again, nobody's going to choose Detroit because, oh my God, they got Tellem over there. But I don't know how much he's really going to be affecting, like, who the Pistons bring in like trades or free agencies or anything like that. So I think Weaver's going to have, a lot of power to do what a general manager does, and either build or destroy the team that he wants, regardless of whether or not he does a good job. That's going to be obviously, proven years down the road. But I think it will be his job that was done no matter what. I don't think it's going to be a situation where he feels like, maybe he wasn't in total control of the team. Uh, is I also don't think he would have taken the job if that was that. And I mean, you can lie to somebody and say, "Hey, the job is yours," and then they get in there, and then you tell them something different. But that would obviously backfire for the Pistons too, because if it happened like that, Weaver would get mad. He'd probably end up getting fired in 2 or 3 years, and then he would just talk bad about Detroit, and then nobody would want to come here because it's like, oh, you told this guy this was his job, and then now he's saying that you guys did X, Y, and Z. So I don't think, and I think it's maybe a popular narrative that I've seen from some local sports talk people here. Is just that the front or the ownership group and front office and whoever else will be meddling in it, and I don't think that's the case, which is another reason why I'm super excited about the signing, because I do think that Weaver is somebody that can do a good job, and I think he's been given kind of total control of the spaceship, if you will, and that's obviously very exciting for me. And then I mean, you just look at kind of where he's come from, and it's dangerous, and you might still have some sticker shock with Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, and because they came from a great organization, and obviously they've not been good for the Lions, but I do think basketball is different in that aspect, and it certainly doesn't always guarantee success. That just because you came from a good system, that you're going to be any better than the last guy was, or that you can do what Sam Presti has done. But I do think him spending years there. He's been in Oklahoma City since I think 2008, and before that he was in Utah for like five or so years. So I mean, this is a guy that's been really in the NBA for just under 20 years, in scouting and in front offices, and this is his first time getting a general manager job. So I think he has the enough experience and enough know-how of how things go just in the league that he's not going to be it's not going to be overwhelming to him. And I like I said, I think the Pistons, their coaching staff wants a point guard. You've seen Dwayne Casey say that, whether it's in free agency or whether it's in the draft. And the fact that OKC has done a pretty good job of identifying guards. No, obviously they got Russell Westbrook, which sounds like it was a big feather in Weaver's cap. They drafted Reggie Jackson, where he's a starting caliber point guard, and they got him, obviously later in the draft, which is still a plus. And then identifying kind of guys in trades who they already proved they were good elsewhere, like SGA, and obviously Chris Paul has been one of the best point guards in NBA history. So that probably didn't take a whole lot of brain power to say, yeah, this guy is good. But they've had a good run of point guards in Oklahoma City, and that's something that I think Detroit definitely wants to where they want to build their foundation at. They still have Luke Kennard. They still obviously have Blake Griffin, but Blake Griffin's not part of the future. Luke Kennard might be. It's kind of a situation to me similar as Christian Wood, where it really just comes down to a number. If Luke Kennard wants like $20 million a year, I think the Pistons probably will and should let him walk. And if he wants, if they're able to kind of talk him down less than that, then I think he's a guy that you can keep around and that you can win with. And the same type of thing with Christian Wood. Christian Wood's a little bit scarier than Luke Kennard to me, only because he won't have he doesn't have the track record that Luke Kennard does, where he's gotten better every single year. Christian Wood's just kind of this was obviously his breakout year, and you wonder kind of how much stock to put into it because he looked really good, but you wonder if he was just really good on a team that was really bad. So more opportunities were obviously being funneled to him, and he had a whole lot of minutes open up for him when considering there was no Blake and then no Andre. There was I thought there was another comment here. Maybe I'm tripping. I thought someone said, why won't they come to Detroit? I think it's fairly simple why people don't want to come to Detroit. I think the weather is a thing for a lot of the guys. It's just not the place that they want to live, and if you have the option to live, somewhere warmer, that makes sense where you can play basketball even outside in your driveway or whatever the case is. And it's just not an attractive destination for free agents. The team is kind of a mess too, so it's not like you go into a situation that's made to win. So if you're trying to win and you want to live somewhere nice, the Pistons aren't going to be your first options, and they don't have some of the star power or even lore that a team like LA has. Boston doesn't really get free agents. They've gotten some. They got Horford, they got Hayward, but they haven't been really able to land like that big time free agent. And they the Clippers are obviously in LA, and they just got Kawhi Leonard, and then essentially traded for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard because Kawhi wasn't going to go there if PG wasn't there. So I think there's a couple reasons why people don't want to go to Detroit, and you see it in like every sport except, well, I guess baseball was a little different when the Tigers were just throwing like crazy money at guys like Prince Fielder and at some of the other free agents that they were able to sign. So obviously no money's a part of it too. In the NBA, everyone can kind of get close to the money, but there's a max that you can give a guy. And in baseball, sometimes you can just go crazy and offer Prince Fielder more than everybody else is, and just gonna be like, oh yeah, I want to do that. But the Tigers were also winning when they were signing those big name guys, and then same, I believe, with the Red Wings. Although that was a long time ago, and I wasn't quite born yet, and I'm not the biggest hockey fan, so I could be wrong on that. But it seems like every time when the Red Wings were building their dynasty, and that they were signing guys, Detroit was hockey town. It was a place to go if you wanted to win, and you got to play for one of the most iconic franchises in history. And while the Pistons are one of the more iconic NBA franchises, it doesn't really, there's definitely a kind of a tier system to it, where I think now you see that guys are, they have LA. The Warriors were pretty, iconic even before they had Steph and stuff. So it's kind of a bidding war for the Pistons and for the city of Detroit to compete with some of these warmer weather places who are in better win now situations. Like I said, I think that was it. You guys have to forgive me because the live setup's a little bit different. We haven't done one of these in a while. But if you guys do wanna check out our podcast, we do have our Sports Carnage podcast that is in the comments right here. It should be the only comment by Detroit Sports Nation, and that one just dropped today after we recorded it yesterday. So a very quick turnaround for all of you, where we play games and all of that fun stuff. We play start, bench, cut. We play basically like a guess who game, where you guys can play along as you're listening to the podcast and see if you can beat Paul, AJ, and myself in the game. And then Matthew Basson is the kind of the game host, if you will, the master of ceremonies. I'm winning that game, by the way. Just in case you guys are confused. I would rather you go back and listen to them all and then count on my points for me. But I'm definitely winning regardless of what any of my podcast mates might say. But that's kind of what we had here. Wanted to do this a little bit earlier, just wasn't able to make it out. But I am glad, and I wanted to get my excitement about Troy Weaver out on the record and see if you guys were, see kind of what you guys had to say. Deborah said, "You are so wrong. Players will come here. Been a fan since '88. Pistons have been great. Been here all my life, 70 years. Do not like anyone that talks down about my city and team. Please shut up." Well, Deborah, I appreciate your passion for Detroit. The only thing that I would tell you is there's like what big name free agent has come to the Pistons. There's not many, and it's not that Detroit's not a great city, but it's one of the best sports cities in the country. It just has inherent disadvantages when you're trying to attract millionaires to come here to do the same job that they can do in other places where they're still millionaires. They still have all the money that they need. And I would love for the Pistons to be the prime spot for Giannis to come next year, but that's just not going to happen. All the places that you see him, kind of linked to are like the Warriors, are places like Miami, where those places definitely, again, they just have inherent advantages to a city like Detroit, to all these big and rich athletes. But I would love to get big name free agents to come here. That would be my dream. If you can already get a player, as opposed to having to draft them and develop them, because there's obviously way more draft bust than there is free agency bust, because with free agency you already kind of know what you got in players, and that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I mean, you look at a guy like Albert Haynesworth in the NFL, who went from Tennessee to Washington. He got this huge contract, and he was an amazing player with the Titans. And then when he got to Washington, after he got paid, he just did not do anything. So definitely free agency bust, but way more draft bust, and it is harder to build a team through the draft than it is to get LeBron to go to the Lakers, and then they trade for Anthony Davis because they have all of their young players that never quite lived up to what LeBron was doing. And now they're probably going to win a championship, and if it's not them, it'll probably be the Clippers, who did the same type of thing. They traded for Paul George and then got Kawhi Leonard to sign there as a free agent. And it's definitely easier in the NBA, at least, to build the team through free agency than it is through the draft. But that is how Detroit teams have even traditionally been built. Is at least for the Pistons. I don't know a whole lot about the old Tiger championship teams or the Red Wing championship teams, so I'll stick to the Pistons. As a lot of their guys were acquired through drafts and through trades. I think the only guy that they got in free agency was they signed Chauncey Billups, but they traded for Ben Wallace, they traded for Rasheed, they traded for Rip, and then they signed Tayshaun, or they drafted Tayshaun. So it's 4 out of the 5 guys there that you had to build in kind of a more traditional method than winning a bidding war, if you will. And then even back then, they obviously drafted Isaiah Thomas, they drafted Dumars, traded for Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn, and then they traded for Mark Aguirre too. So yeah, and then they drafted Dennis Rodman. So again, not a whole lot, at least when it comes to the Pistons, of getting big time free agents to come here and then win championships. The free agents that we have gotten here that were big names at the time, guys like Josh Smith, guys like Ben Gordon, and even Charlie Villanueva, and as silly as that sounds now, those were big names in free agency the years they were coming out, and they were like tier 2 free agents essentially. But even then, those are kind of the guys that the Pistons have always targeted, at least in free agency, and none of those worked out. But they all came here because the Pistons gave them more money than anybody else would. And it's not worked out for us in the past, and I hope it works out for us in the future, because I would love nothing more than to be a part of that parade that's going down on Woodward. That is what we have, though. So, Deborah, again, I appreciate your passion for the city. And I've been Ryan from the Sports Carnage Podcast. Again, if you guys like what you heard here and then would like to hear more of not only myself, but Matthew Bass and AJ Riley and Paul Rochon as well, you can go and click the link in the Sports Carnage. I've been kind enough to provide it for you in the comments right here. Make sure that you guys like, share, subscribe, listen, review, all of that. Share this video to any Piston pages that you guys see, or share it and laugh about it with your friends and say, haha, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then go on Detroit Sports Nation as well, because we bring you literally all the news in Detroit sports you can find in one very simple shop or stop and shop there, whatever you want to call it. But DSN has everything covered for you, from college players testing positive for COVID-19 to flashbacks of the Red Wings winning Stanley Cups. Literally everything is there, and it's a very awesome website. And check it out. And you guys already know that, of course, because you're on their page, watching me on their Facebook Live. But make sure you guys go through their videos, listen to the podcast, and then do whatever else you want, because it's a free country. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I've been Ryan Griffin, and until next time, have a good night.